We're going. Welcome. Welcome to the after party, everyone.
Hi, everyone. We never introduce ourselves.
You know what? Maybe we did on the first week or something.
Right.
But it's been 14 weeks.
Every week for 14 weeks we've done this.
There we go.
Do you think we'll keep going through the summer? We haven't even talked about this.
That's a good question. We probably should talk about that at some point. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, nobody's going on vacation. Right? So.
I think your computer is throwing some audio out.
Oh, it is, yeah. But yeah,
true.
I mean, people aren't going on vacation.
Right. I did try. I am waiting for you to clear a week for me to be away to move so
That's
I
right.
can move to my
You
new
are.
house.
Move to your new house. Exciting times.
That's exactly it.
Look out.
Yeah. Look out.
Look out. All right. Anyway, I am Jeremy.
Right.
This is Bobby.
I'm Bobby.
After we talked about doing an introduction, we might as well do it.
Yeah. Let's do top 3 things about yourself. That might be.
Wow.
less.
That feels like a lot of pressure all of a sudden out of nowhere.
I know when you have to. Well,
yeah,
just,
I'm just
free
adjusting these a
association,
little
like-
bit. I'm gonna make it a little brighter in here.
Can you control the room
I can
lights?
it's very cool. We have this thing called an A10 Mini Pro, and we can do camera control over it, so I can control the iris and the shutter and the gain on our cameras right from the software on my computer. It's pretty cool.
So basically,
for a nerdy guy like me, it's pretty fun times, actually.
I mean, every week it sort of feels similar. Like you get here and you sort of scramble to problem solve a couple things, but also you're always sort of changing the setup. Like maybe people don't realize
we're testing all kinds of things for the eventual like in-person live stream at the church. So every after party, we like test something new and we're like, okay, does this work with the live stream?
Right.
And if we send a signal through this website, is it going to get to YouTube? So there's a lot of that happening on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. 3 things about myself?
Yeah, 3 things about yourself.
3 things about myself.
Like tell it slant a little. Like not the obvious things. Like
I love that phrase.
I know.
Tell all the truth, but tell it slant.
Yeah. Poets. We need poets.
Emily Dickinson?
Yeah. Dickinson.
So, you know what? I was going to say I'm my dad, but it still feels really weird for me to say that,
that's
to
really
describe myself as a dad. It still feels really weird. So,
Maybe
let
you'll
alone
just
a
never
girl
get
dad,
used to.
which I am
Oh,
now.
I love you in propaganda.
It's true.
My hero on Twitter.
But yeah, I have 2 kids now.
Yeah.
Just got another one.
Right.
So
well, I got to see
yes,
in person.
we got to see Em in person.
Yeah, just in the back seat of the car. But you had said, "Oh, Eaton's coming by, Rachel," and I was like, "I'm gonna listen for them when they pull up." So you went out, and I went running down the stairs here at the church to get a glimpse of this little girl.
Yeah,
and
so she was not happy. She was. She had just come from a doctor's appointment with Rachel, so she was in the back seat.
Yeah.
Screaming.
Yeah, she was screaming.
Yeah.
But as soon as you like touched her face,
oh man.
It was nice.
Plus,
it was nice to see Rachel.
She's got some strength now. She can scream.
I love it.
Even that's good news, right? So.
I love it. Okay, you're a dad, but it's weird.
No, it's not. It's not weird. Well, it is weird to be a dad. But it's weird to describe myself as a dad.
Yeah.
I mean, this feels generic, but I'm a pastor. Like, I mean, so much of my job is like such a big part of who I am. And I think that can be bad and that can be good, but it just is. It is what it is. I haven't always been a pastor, but I am right now. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And like, I can't say a pastor and a dad and a husband, like all those things it's like all mixed into one. Right. So how about, well, everybody knows I really love coffee.
Yeah.
So this morning I made my shot, but I got all fancy. So I got out I weighed it all. I weighed how many ounces I put in and how many ounces I got out, because I was trying to play with ratios a little bit.
Right.
So I was trying to hit a direct 2-to-1 ratio on my espresso shot this morning. And I did, and it was very good. So
great.
Also into coffee. Obviously cocktails, because we've talked about that a few times.
Right.
But that's new. Like that's only in the last 6 months that I've decided I'm obsessed with cocktails.
Do you think, coffee has been a love for a long time for you. Yeah. Do you think cocktails you also like love things for a bit and then drop off?
A little bit, yeah.
Do you think cocktails has staying power?
I think I got so much money invested.
Yeah, so many bottles.
I gotta stick with it. But you know, I used to be really into Scotch for a long time, and I still enjoy Scotch. Yeah. But that has kind of shifted a little bit to cocktails now. Although I've even sort of experimented with how you can use whiskey and obviously whiskey, but Scotch a little bit in cocktails and stuff. Which has been kind of fun. So, but that's my new little habit toy.
Yeah.
That I play with. So
that's fun.
All right. Now let's see.
I know, because I didn't think about the question.
Is 4-H going to be one of them at
all?
No,
4-H is not one of them.
That's my favorite Bobby story. No, not a Bobby story. It's just my favorite Bobby.
Actually, Ryan today asked me, "Were you even in 4-H?" And
were you
like,
even
yes.
Why would you?
Yeah. We were talking about dogs and me growing up on a farm.
Okay.
Yeah, you missed it.
I missed it. Yeah.
What would be 3 things about me? In a similar way, I think being like a partner and a spouse still feels kind of funny and comical to me. that happened.
I don't know if it's you, but it's not so much that feels comical. It's just describe it in this is a thing about me.
Right.
Is that I'm a husband or I'm a father. That feels a little weird.
Right.
It doesn't even feel being in that role. I love being in that role. It's awesome with my kids and my wife, but
yeah. What is that? That's funny.
It's because of Christian father,
the baggage.
That stuff on Twitter when men who describe themselves that way, you're always
True.
Like, it's going to be a bad timeline. They describe themselves as Christian father, pastor, some husband or something like that. You're in for a rough time on the timeline, so maybe that's where it's coming from.
Maybe that's it. That's true, hey? Because you don't fit that sort of persona. I'd say that's a fun thing about me. What else is? I really I kind of not tensions, but I like having my feet in a couple different worlds. So I like being I'm a farm kid who loves being a city person.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's something about me that's fun.
Yeah.
I like really sacred things, but I also like really profane things. Those that kind of tensions of that. That's fun for me. So that'd be number 2.
Okay.
Number 3, being an auntie.
You get a lot of aunt stories. You like that.
I love being an auntie. I'm not a parent, but being an auntie feels like a very sacred sort of position in my life, so I love it. And I love being auntied. I have aunties in my life who are very important to me.
I've never heard so much about aunties until Bobby.
That's because I believe Liz Gilbert calls us the auntie brigade. Those of us who don't have children, but take sort of the role of being an auntie very seriously. Yeah. So
you'll be a good auntie to M.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I will take them all.
I will be.
That's good. I love
People ask what my favorite Scotch is. So Ardbeg is my favorite distillery. They make a lot of really great Scotches.
Right. Have you ever nerded out with Jonathan about Scotch?
We've talked about Scotch a little bit, yeah.
Ian, really?
So, but the Wigadal from Ardbeg is my favorite Scotch that you can get anywhere. Okay. Well, not anywhere, but you can get it regularly, and it's excellent. That would be my go-to. I've had Scotches that I enjoyed more that are one-offs and somebody spent a ridiculous amount of money to let me try it. That's very cool. Right. But as one that you can get a hold of, Ardbeg, Wigadal, and I like that. I like Islays, and I like the briny and the peaty, and I like a little bit of smoke. Yeah, okay. But I don't like it overdone because the Ardbeg Corryvreckan, which I also have a bottle of, is very smoky. Okay. And it just overpowers a little bit too much iodine, but I appreciate a little bit in it because I really like mezcal over tequila.
Oh yes. So, over tequila.
Yeah, I think I do.
Oh, over.
I think I do.
Wow. Okay. So. I think there's a place for it, but
those are good lists.
Actually, killing me. Also, I see Ashley's comment about this. We're gonna get to myth and this sort of tension of interpretation. People really sort of trip over the word when it comes to the Bible. Do you see that point? So Ashley's saying, just really struggling with people having the problem of calling the Bible a myth. So I see it. Yep. We're going to try to get to it.
Talk to it.
But we're not there yet.
Not yet. We're getting there. Also, I would never say the Bible is myth.
Oh, right.
Myth in the Bible,
I'm just reading the thing.
No, I know.
Okay. Okay. So we've done a little check-in. We want to do a little check-in around what's going on in the world. And something interesting that came up today with our team was just naming the movement towards justice when it comes to Black Lives Matter in the world and the ways that different people have sort of stepped into it. But the question was asked, is this a moment that can be sustained? Are we going to see real lasting change? I mean, it is really interesting to keep up with some of the news in the States around decisions around policing and cities and what they're doing with funding. So it seems like it's taking some action.
Yeah, some quite interesting things out of, was it San Francisco or LA, where they're saying, trained, unarmed professionals would be responding to, and they listed a whole bunch of situations now that police would have been first responders to, and it's going to be specifically unarmed responses to these types of situations. Now, again, certainly there's going to be things that get violent, and there's certainly going to be a need for police officers, especially in larger cities like San Francisco and LA.
Right.
But thinking about where can we change first point of contact in some of these things. I mean, that's a big shift in municipal thinking.
Yes, it really is.
And so the question today was, I'm trying to remember how we framed it. Like I think we were all around the room saying the intensity of this moment can't be sustained.
Yes. Yeah. We were sort of asking that question. What is it? Yeah. What's the reality of what it feels like to be people, humans that can handle so much tension, but can we hold the weight of it for that long?
And you have to believe, I believe anyway, that this huge eruption of Black Lives Matter was in part because of the lockdowns and the shutdowns with COVID. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think you had all of this pent up, wanting to do something and wanting to do something meaningful. Yes. And then this cause came along and it was like, okay, people could pour that into it. Right. I mean, sometimes this is what has to happen in terms of cultural moments, is there's this confluence of events that pull everything together. And I mean, that's a really interesting thing right now. Yeah. That this happened at a time where everybody was looking for something meaningful to put their energy into, and that's
especially
good.
I mean, I think I don't know if we'll talk about this specifically around myth, but the formation of myth in light of our mortality, like the meaning making that's needed when we're sort of staring at death. And I wonder about that the moment of sort of having to stare at our mortality and our vulnerability, calling us to like, what are we here for, if not something more meaningful? There's something about that relationship, right?
Because I mean, and I'm not, I don't want to diminish this all, but I mean, these types of things have been happening in Canada and America for a very long time. And yet this time it galvanized the world really to grab a hold of it. Now, again, the question this morning was, we can't maintain that kind of intensity forever, marching in the streets forever. The danger is a week from now, a month from now, we just go back to normal.
Yes, right.
I don't think that's what anybody wants.
No.
And I don't think that's going to happen. Like,
that's the tone you take. That's a really interesting tone.
I just have a sense.
Something really interesting there. I don't
I think maybe I'm trying to be like cautiously optimistic.
Right.
Because I'm not unaware of how difficult real systemic change is. But this feels like it's more than just a moment. Like, this feels like people are actually engaging.
Would we say watershed? Is that
maybe.
Could it be a watershed moment?
Yeah, but it feels like people are thinking differently. They're open to new ideas about things. It feels like not everyone, but it feels like some people are actually challenging their presuppositions.
Yes, and like looking for the information, sharing the information. A lot of just chatting yesterday in a conversation with my aunt around how to like learn the language of the moment when we're, there's sort of always that requirement to like, are these words working anymore? Oh, maybe they're not. Right. Okay, what are the new words? How do I learn what they mean in a large cultural conversation? Yeah. It seems like, people are reaching for those things and taking responsibility for themselves and for their learning.
Yeah, I mean, Andy posted on here, vast collective meaning making is what's happening right now. But it's true. I mean, there's quite lovely. I mean, this is how these things happen. Like, we don't create meaning in ourselves. We don't change our ideas on our own. We don't read books and come across ideas and be like, oh, I'm going to change the way I view the world. This confluence of things happen, and we share with each other, and sort of collectively we take these leaps forward. Right. Right. We like to. There's something. I went to a weird metaphor in my head.
Whoa! What could it have been? You have every right to not speak it.
Well, no. I just don't know how useful it is. But there was. in evolutionary biology, there was the idea of evolution, that it was a long, slow process of change that happened.
Right.
And that's not actually what we believe now in evolutionary biology. Now we talk about punctuated equilibrium, which is essentially that if you look at the fossil layers, what you see is long periods of nothing changing, and then climate changes or things that happen in the environment, and everything mutates and changes very rapidly.
That's really
and then long periods of dormancy.
Right.
So evolution is not like this long, slow, steady progress.
Right.
It's changes in environment that cause rapid mutation, and we figure out what works. Well,
adaptation.
Adaptation. And then you get another thing. And I think that's the same thing with sort of our cultural myths, is that they last for a very long time until all of a sudden they don't work anymore.
Right.
And all of a sudden when they don't work,
it's like a great collapse and a great rebuilding.
And collectively we have to come up with a new narrative, and then we all grab a hold of that new narrative, and we start to make sense of that. Phyllis, why am I blanking on her last name? Tribble. Not Tribble. Trickle. Phyllis Trickle?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
There are a couple Phyllises there.
There is a couple. But, but in her book, Great Emergence.
Okay.
Great Emergence, yes. I'm quite sure I have the book right, but
okay.
But she talks about, in Christian history, it's like every 500 years, we have these major theological shifts. Trickle. Yeah. I knew Trouble with Tribbles is the Star Trek episode from the original with Shatner, and I was like, it can't be Tribbles. That's a different thing, but it's Phyllis Trickle.
And the subtitle is How Christianity is Changing and Why.
Yeah, but she, wrote this book, 20 years ago?
Whoa.
10 years ago? Anyway,
yeah.
But she talks about every 500 years. So you have the Reformation, and then you go back to around the turn of the century where you get satisfaction theory, and then you go back before that where we switch away from Christus Victor as our main narrative, and Christendom comes into the world. Like every 500 years, roughly, there's like these major shifts in culture, which result in major shifts in sort of the way we think about Christianity. And like that's kind of how the world works. Is we're not on a steady climb. We're on these things until it builds up, and then there's a change.
So
and I'm hoping that that's what this moment is when it comes to our awareness around, not the kind of overt racism, but the ways that it's built into our systems.
Right.
So who knows?
Right.
But I want to be hopeful.
Yeah. So I can hear that. I can hear that in your voice.
Yeah. That was a long sidetrack.
That you want to be hopeful.
Yeah.
So something else that's going on around here is we're getting ready to reopen.
Oh, man.
So our team was around today, and we were mapping things out and walking things out, and exploring like what systems we use and how they need to change. And it seemed really clear that there are so many details.
It's a lot.
There's so many.
Yeah.
It's comical that there's so many.
Yeah, like right now we're in the sanctuary, but the room is set up socially distanced right now.
Yeah, it's weird.
Oh man, you turn the cameras around and show you guys, but it's it's weird. And then even just thinking like, how are we gonna do registrations? How are we gonna get people in? Because on a practical level, a family of 6 that can sit together.
Right. So we were talking about cohorts.
Yeah.
Or families.
Yeah. Because a family of 6 that comes in takes up a lot less room than 6 singles that are each spread 6 feet apart.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we don't want singles coming to church, because in some ways singles are probably the people who want to be back and need to be back in community more than anyone. So I mean, you want to create space, but just how do you do seating in ways that allows for that?
Right.
And what's the number of people we can fit in the room, and how's it going to work?
And it's summer, and we can't, don't turn the fans on, watch it from the balcony. Like, there's just so many details. We sort of
how do we do traffic flow?
Open one, we'd be like, okay, we have all the seats spaced out, but then like, how do we move people in the room? And then it's like, okay, we're gonna need these arrows here, so we're gonna put the coffee stations here. How many, everything.
I know.
Everything needs to be thought about.
Yeah, but I think what's important, you've said this to the team a couple times, is like, look, this is going to be our reality.
Yeah, we have to learn how to do this.
So let's learn, because there's no waiting this out. Like, it's going to be. I don't want to scare anybody here, but like the vaccine is not coming next month, right? So we're going to have to be aware of COVID in our lives for the foreseeable future, which means, things like church have to, we have to get back to our lives, but our lives are going to be different for some time. So now is a good time in the summer when, our numbers are generally lower at church anyway, for us to dip our toes in and figure these things out, and be overly cautious to begin. Because there's less people, and we'll figure it out. We'll do our best, and then we slowly learn things.
Yeah. And again, like back to this idea of adaptation, that there's there is, I mean, everyone was pretty energized, you know, in our team. I mean, we have a team of like really hardworking people that aren't sort of scared of a challenge. But I think that we're all so curious about like what we can do, what we can learn, how this might bring us together. It's quite an interesting, I mean, it's more than an experiment. It's our lives. but trying to, I don't know, of course we take it very seriously, but also to hold it with the weight that it deserves, but also with a lightness to it. You know, there is something playful about moving chairs around and and the
planning for sure.
Like throwing ideas around and you know, when you don't think of someone and someone else in the room does, and you're like, right, look, I didn't think of that. It's something really kind of an interesting organic process at work that I think, we're game for. We think maybe 30% of the community will be game for as well. Yeah,
in the opening stages.
Right, exactly.
You know, and again, if you haven't seen our plan, you can go to commons.church/reopen. It's there with quite a lot of detail. And we'll be adding more as we go because there's things that we're still now, like I said, today was the first day we set up the space, the gym and the sanctuary to figure out how the seating is going to work. So we'll be adding more. And the plan is to have registration for July services available on Sunday. So we've already had some people asking, can I register? When will that be available? We need a couple more days. But by Sunday, we're hoping to have all the bugs worked out and tested, and you'll be able to register a seat for those services in July.
Right. And live stream isn't going anywhere.
Live stream is still going to be here.
Still live streaming, so that's fun that this moment pushed us to live streaming.
It's fun that it pushed us to that, and it's also been, I think for all of us, a little eye-opening to see how many people have connected with us online only during the season. Like it's not a small number of people that are like, hey, I'm from the UK, or if I'm from Calgary, but I've never been to Commons before. Right. But I've been watching you faithfully for the last 2 months or something. Right. There's a lot of these stories. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like tuning in every week.
It's more than I tune in. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Okay, so let's chat about Sunday.
Let's do it.
I thought it would be fun for us to chat a little bit, obviously to get to the message, but we had other things happening. And one of the things that seemed pretty meaningful to people is our responsive reading that Larissa and I worked on together. And we were going to do like a split screen thing, but we ended up just going back and forth, which was fine. But even today we were like, oh, if only we would have had split screen.
We were joking about, so if you saw the prayer, by the way, it's on our YouTube channel. It's its own video. You should watch it. It's beautiful. But it camera cuts between, it goes like this. There's Bobby, and then it goes Larissa.
Right.
You know, it cuts back and forth. But we were saying, it's like if they were sitting opposite sides in the camera, and then like the line like disappeared between them, and they could high five each other in the middle of the room. That would have been terrible.
It was such a kind of a like.
It was true.
Held some like somber.
It was a very meaningful moment, but.
But it was. I was scheduled to write the responsive reading, and then I really wanted to center Larissa's voice, and she's a great writer, and. I just thought, like, let's work on it together, Larissa, and see what we can do. And it was a really fun. I mean, typically we, everyone, whoever's sort of assigned that worship element in the service works on it on their own and shares it, with a couple people. But this was a collaborative event, and it was great. And again, Larissa is a great writer. That language at the end where she wrote. Preferencing what was her language? We said it so many times.
Bring it out here.
Not the anger of the strong. Anyways, it was great. It was just like a mic drop moment where that part of the prayer really kind of left it resounded. I felt like it resounded.
I'm trying to find it here, but I typed liturgy wrong.
It's a tricky word.
I'm learning how to type.
But it's really neat to think about the ways that our liturgy kind of rises up in a moment, and it seemed really important and meaningful to name name some of the struggle and the grief on a global and then like a city and then like a really personal level, and then also match that with our like Trinity language, which
beautiful.
Was great.
The line was, give us courage to see ourselves in the lived experience of the weak rather than the anger of the strong, which was beautiful.
Larissa.
So, you know, it's pretty exciting. I mean, some people know this, but Larissa's joining us on a full-time paid internship starting in August.
Yeah, it's great.
So, I mean, she's been on our team for a while, but she'll be full-time paid internship. So we're pretty pumped about that.
We love it. So. It's great. So that was kind of a highlight. It was a highlight for me to participate in. I think it seemed really meaningful. And I had, you know, people from far away parts of my life, you know, asking.
There's a church from Victoria that asked us if they could use it. So.
Amazing. Amazing.
So I think Kevin's working on that. You'll probably get an email asking permission for you and Larissa if that was okay.
Oh, that's lovely.
They wanted to give you guys credit and use it. And I thought, sounds good to me. But I'm like,
I mean, that is our posture.
Totally.
To like put our stuff out there and say like, please.
The Liturgy Blog, absolutely. The Liturgy Blog is there for anybody to view. It's commons.church/liturgy. So all of our prayers are always written there. But that's actually the main reason that started. We have that, and we have open.commons.church, which is that's password protected, but that's for other churches to use our prayers that we write, the artwork that we create. We give that all away to other churches that need it. So that's always been our posture, is to share whatever.
If it were me, I'd probably be more stingy about it. You're much more generous than me. Like, you're gonna pay me for
I'm just gonna share Bobby's stuff.
I know.
Here's this beautiful stuff that Bobby and Larissa wrote. Yeah, you can have it. I'm very generous with other people's stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Okay, let's talk about the message.
Yeah.
So we were in our second message of our Inspired series. Again, a series that you're pumped about.
I am pumped about this one. It's fun. It's a good one.
You were talking about myths and meaning making, and particularly centered the creation and fall. You didn't do Exodus
I did
stuff, did you?
No. So I stayed this is important because I think I don't think myth is the term to apply to things like the Exodus.
You don't.
I think the Exodus stories are certainly not
the Red Sea.
I don't think those. I would argue those are certainly not objectively historical stories, but they're not myths in the sense of what we were talking about on Sunday. So here's how I would break down sort of Genesis into Exodus. I think you have Genesis 1-11, which I would call mythology, and we'll talk about what I mean by that. But these are stories that are created to speak about the formation of the human story, why we're here, how did the earth come to be, and that's everything up till Babel. So the fall is the creation is Genesis 1 and 2. The fall is Genesis 3-11, right? Is 11 Babel? Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yeah. The fall is not they eat the apple, which is not an apple, by the way, but they eat that and then that's the end of it. No, like the fall is this ongoing process of that, and then flood, and then Babel, and then what brings us out of the fall is Abraham, which is the new promise to heal things, right? That's where we end fall and we move it to the next stage of the Bible. Now, I would call sort of Abraham probably through David until you start to get, or up to David when you start to get to the kings, but through Moses, I would call that archetypal stories. So the story of Abraham, the story of Moses, these are not stories that are made out of whole cloth to explain sort of the formation of the universe. These are probably stories that have a historical antecedent, some person who lived that life. Like to me, Adam and Eve are probably not historical people at all.
Right.
That's a description of humanity.
Right.
And if we can talk about that because we can get super into the mythology there. But Moses, Abraham, these were probably people who did something important, and their story grew bigger than they were as it got told over time. But you're still rooted in a lived experience. Yeah,
that's interesting because I looked through Karen Armstrong's book, A Short History of Myth.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that little book. I was flipping through it again and like noticing what I had underlined in the past. And I was like, oh, man, I got to read this whole thing start front to back again. But her definition of myth is what you're calling an archetypal story. which is something that has some sort of historical setting, but it then keeps happening. You know, you sort of trace Exodus again and again and again and again.
And this is where it gets tough, because what do we mean by these languages?
I remember really liking that language and like really resonating with that. So then, do I need to peel that apart now and sort of see? I mean, I like that. I like how you're breaking those things apart. I would just need to think about it a little
and I mean,
more.
maybe it's not even, you don't even need to call one myth and one not myth, but it's understanding that these are different types of stories. Like like creation based on the Enuma Elish is a very different type of story than Moses and the Red Sea.
Yes,
right?
A group of people in slavery being, whatever sort of the plagues really looked like, or the parting of the Red Sea really looked like. There was this group of people who struggled to be free and found freedom.
Which is different than the waters of chaos swirled together into two gods and created the world. And that's okay. I mean, that's the beautiful thing, is we have all these different types of stories, stories that mean something to us.
Right. And we see that throughout the Bible, front to back, in terms of even the New Testament, sort of different kinds of ways of communicating. Like we have the genre of the thing. So there's almost like different genres of sort of myth. I'm thinking of myth a little bit more broadly. You're breaking it down a little more specifically. Helpful. I think.
I don't use myth around Jesus too much, because I think that definitely is going to make people uncomfortable, and I actually think it does go too far a bit.
Karen Armstrong's language was like, she had this really broad definition and said, you know, the resurrection happened and keeps happening. Which I was like, oh, I love that. Like, we talk about resurrection like
totally
that. But you don't want to call it myth.
But what I was saying in the first message, I very much talked about John is written from a very different place. Yes. 2 generations of Jesus followers after looking back on the story of Jesus and trying to say, what does this mean? Like, that's a different type of story than Mark is. Who's trying to say, hey, here's this guy, here's what happened, here's the story of it. So, I mean, again, and I think myth, what you end up with is sort of you have a spectrum of myth. There's everything from the Enuma Elish.
I think that's how I've lived with it.
All the way through to how do we create meaning in a story like Jesus. And I would say you have creation on the one end of it. You've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses here. And then you've got what's happening in the Jesus story, which is sort of the far end of that, which is, the sort of basic historical narrative is still there. You're too close to it to be crazily exaggerated. But you're telling it in a different way to get to a different type of question. You know, like if you look at John and compare it to the other Gospels, it's not really that much more of a stretch in terms of what it's asking you to believe about Jesus. But it's clearly telling the story with different emphasis around it. You know, how did Jesus change the world? What did Jesus do in his life? You know, and I think those are both important. I think, and I would go back to the first message in the series, we need both of those. We need both of those types of stories to get a well-rounded picture.
I could just quote myself for a moment.
You ever try to do that in like a paper? Where you wrote something in another class?
No, Jeremy, I haven't.
Oh, man, I always wanted to quote myself in my own papers.
Okay. Well, that's really fun to think about the different uses of the word and different sort of the breadth of it or the specificity to kind of locate it a little differently. So I'm curious, we were chatting a little bit about how much in your sermon, how much time and word count you had retelling, Enuma Elish and what was the other one?
Gilgamesh.
It is Gilgamesh. I was like,
I did 3 of them.
It's not that I don't know this stuff, but I was not studying it recently. So could we say 3/4 of your message was, I mean
half probably.
Yeah, a little over half, I'm going to say. I read it.
Fair enough.
So, by weight of how you located your word count, how important are those myths in like our everyday living?
It's an interesting way to think about it. So
with the text.
Yeah, so what I would say is not very.
Okay.
I think that the Bible stands on its own. If it didn't, we wouldn't have preserved those stories the same way that we did.
Yeah.
Right?
If they were just unlocked, you couldn't
Exactly.
unlock them. You couldn't sort of break
into them. And I think
them.
that's the same today. I mean, the stories that really sort of grab a hold of us are ones that you don't have to know, the whole backstory to be able to access. Now, I think what's beautiful about these types of things is then when you do, it's like, you get another layer and you get another little Easter egg there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be super nerdy, but I'm going to, compare this to, if you watch the Avengers movies.
Never.
You should. You're missing out. You're
haven't
totally
seen
missing
any
out.
of them.
So, but Infinity War and Endgame, like, if you watch the stories, like they for the most part, for the most part, they stand on their own. They're good movies. But if you put the time in, you watched all 20 movies leading up to it.
There are 20?
Yeah, it's 20 movies leading up to it.
Silver probably has something
if you read the comic books and you know some of the backstory, it's like there's these little Easter eggs that make moments that much more meaningful.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what you have in the Bible. Like they're told in a way, like they're meant to be read on their own. They're meant to be understood on their own. They're shaped and they're crafted so that these stories will inform us.
Yeah.
We don't need Babylonian stories and we don't need Sumerian stories. But if you know what the writers and the redactors are pushing back against, then you see some new layers on there.
Yeah, I mean my experience with encountering these myths in relationship with how I was holding the scriptures was pretty important. Like I think the added layers came into my life in a time when I thought, I wondered if I don't know exactly my memory of the thing, but was I holding the Bible and being like, should I keep my relationship with you or not? And then you find out like redactors and the piecing together and the borrowing and the challenging nature of like, okay, your myths have said this, but we're forming a myth that says this about the divine. And I remember being like, I'm going to keep at this. Yeah. Like my experience of it wasn't threat. It was such important invitation to like keep further up and further in, it was like, oh my gosh, what a complex way of forming our sacred text. That feels like it fits my complex, life and my complex relationships. So I asked the question knowing that at a time in my life, it was really important to figure out more about those myths and make more space in my imagination for them. And
I think that's the beauty of it, right? It's like, so same thing when we talk about Jesus, right? So Jesus says, faith of a little child, you can come to me. Like you don't need to understand anything about substitutionary atonement or Christus Victor or... how penal substitution is supposed to work or not, any of that stuff. Like all you have to do is trust in Jesus. Now, then we spend our lives trying to understand what that story means to us and how to articulate it and how to understand it. Yeah. So it's the background to these myths is like that. Like it adds more depth, it adds more nuance, it adds more beauty. Do you need that?
Right.
To come to the Bible? Do you need a degree in Ugaritic studies to be able to understand?
Do you need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on the grad school degree?
But, and this is part of what I think churches can do for people at their best is give the space for people like you and myself and our team who have the inclination and the time to study these things and then to bring them and make them accessible to people. Because I think, can these stories be beautiful without the antecedent myths? Yes. For an example, and this is part of the reason I talked about this one, I started with this one, Noah. Noah's a really difficult story. Yeah. Like, no matter, what do you do with a story where God wipes out basically all living things on the earth and starts again?
Right. Like, let's not turn our brains off when we're troubled by, or when we have a response to that. I think
that's a heavy story. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Now, when you are able to compare it to Atrahasis and you are able to compare it to the Gilgamesh epic, and you have, so the earth is full of violence and the gods wipe those out, or the gods bring that violence because they're annoyed with people and they wipe everyone out. And the hero of the story, the prize for the hero at the end, is Utnapishtim gets to go live in his mystical land, and Atrahasis gets spirited away to live with the gods.
I just want to say, I have a new thing that I need you to do. I need you to make stop action films of these little stories, because I don't really care about all the details.
There's actually some great.
I want you and Eaton to make stop action retellings of these. This is it. This is it for us.
There's some great animated tellings on YouTube.
Are they really?
So
anyway, so I didn't mean to.
Stories, right,
I just got excited about this
yeah.
idea of you guys making these myths.
We've tried. He always wants to make these stop animation movies.
It takes a long
and then he gets bored of them halfway through. Yeah. So we haven't got very far, but we have tried.
Maybe when he gets a
little older, I think.
Auntie Bobby can suggest.
Oh, there you go. But when you understand, okay, so these stories end with the hero being spirited away to some other realm as the reward.
Okay.
The reward of Noah is that he lands back where he started.
I love
with
that
his
point
family,
you made.
with the understanding, okay, we can start again, and God promising, okay, we're gonna do this again, and I'm not gonna wipe out the world again, and you're gonna be better.
Yeah.
You know, you're not a different person.
Right.
I didn't turn you into, like, Atrahasis gets turned into sort of mini god and goes to live with him, and Utnapishtim lives forever. And, you know, Noah's still Noah,
just a
who
dude.
still has to land, who still dies, who still makes mistakes after the flood.
Gonna get drunk.
Yeah, like, but I mean, there's something really powerful when you understand that the Hebrews were like, oh, that's a good story, okay.
Yeah.
But we don't like this part where the hero leaves.
Right.
We want our hero back. We want our hero still flawed.
Yeah.
And we want our hero trying to do their best in the light of everything that God has done for them. Like, that, to me, that's a really powerful story, regardless of our time and place anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's where I think having a little bit of the backstory does become meaningful. Is it necessary? No.
Right.
You know, I mean, people have found meaning in the Noah story for years without that. That's okay.
Right.
But to me, I mean, that not only helps me understand the story, that gives me beautiful insight into God.
Yeah. Right. That compare contrast.
Yeah. What is redemption for God?
Right.
Redemption for God is landing you back where you started.
Right.
To try harder and do it all over again.
Right.
You know, redemption is not, and to Christian theology, this is a challenge. Redemption is not you fly away. Right. You know, where you leave everything behind. Right. Because we have that sometimes in our story which is way too overemphasized, right? Rather than creating change, you know.
Man, it's got me thinking about all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I mean, where do I want to go with that? It's really, I mean, we talk about this quite a bit in terms of what does it look like? What is discourse? I mean, we have to talk about it on Twitter, you know, Twitter discourse and cancel culture. Like, what does it look like to change? And it's really interesting to think about the point of these myths, this like hero landed back, allowed to like keep trying and struggling and offering, sort of the grace of that version of a heroic tale is really interesting, because I keep, you know, one of the things I keep kind of wondering about is like, sometimes people make really horrible mistakes and they need to like go away and like do some work and stop taking up airtime, and you know, but sometimes people like trip and make mistakes in a public way, and everyone's like, like, you know, just stop, you know, everyone piles on.
There's no redemption.
Like, what does it really look like for us if you can't like make some mistakes with your language, even in a public space and discourse, and learn and like try to get better? It seems like even this myth around Noah and like contrasting it with like a different sort of version of what a hero looks like is sort of, it's just like kind of sparking and connecting to some of those questions that we ask of like, what does it mean to give people grace to change if they're open to it? And then what does it look like to,
I mean, this is a tough one, you know, in terms of the whole cancel culture thing right now.
I know, right?
Because I'm not, and I know you're not either, on that boat. Like, oh, cancel culture is terrible. Like, some people need to get canceled.
Get out. Move away. God, I don't want to hear from you.
And some people need to, like you said, they need to take some space to learn. Yeah. And if they're not willing to do it, sometimes we need to make that space for them.
Exactly. Right.
So there's some truth to that. Yeah. But I think if cancel culture becomes, hey, you've got work to do. Yeah. And we're just gonna, you know, shut down. We're not going to listen to this story right now until you do it. That's one thing. If cancel culture is about, actually, I don't want to see you rehabilitated. I don't want to see you change. I need
an enemy right now, and you're it.
Then I think it actually becomes toxic. Yeah. Same way, I think, we're all having conversations right now about our justice system. Yeah. If our justice system is retributive and it's not rehabilitative, it's not justice. Right. All it is then is transferring pain. Yeah. So the person who steals or the person who hurts someone, well, we hurt them back or we take something from them. Yeah, it's such a lack of imagination. Can that play a part in rehabilitation? Yeah, perhaps. Right? There are people who are not willing to be rehabilitated and change, and there needs to be some protection for the sort of the public around that. Yeah. But if our goal in justice is not to rehabilitate people, redeem people, introduce them back in, no matter what they've done. Yeah. Is that always possible? No, of course not. Right. But if it's not our goal, then I don't think we should call it justice. And I think the same thing kind of goes with cancel culture. Is there a time, timeouts? We have those in our house, right? Yeah. So, is there a time for a timeout, whether my son wants it or not? Right. Is there a time for someone to get a timeout on Twitter, whether they want it or not? Yeah, there is. Right. And that kind of cancel culture can be good. It can be helpful. But if my intent with that is not that you would learn from this and I could show grace for this at some point down the road, then I think I'm probably just an angry person that wants my pound of flesh. And then I'm playing into the same story from the other side. Right? Yeah. So
I never thought Noah was going to offer me a window into.
And we don't have to go down this one for too long, but there's this passage in Mark 8, I think, when these people come and they accuse Jesus of driving out demons by the power of Satan. Yeah. And Jesus basically says, hey, can Satan drive out, Satan? Gerard would interpret that and he would say, what Jesus is doing is he's actually reinforcing that, because then Jesus goes into this whole thing about,
what did you mean there? He's reinforcing that. What did you mean there?
That he's actually agreeing with them. He's actually telling them, yes, Satan is the only one who does drive out Satan. Got it. Because what Satan does is, once we notice something, or once we notice Satan in our midst, and by Satan, I mean that metaphorically, like once we notice an adversary in our midst, our tendency is to want to get mad. And what Satan does is like, as soon as you notice Satan and you're mad at Satan, Satan like swings around on your side and is like, you better get him and drive him out. And Satan convinces you to drive Satan out. And in that way, Satan still has control over you. Right. Because you're still doing the thing that you were doing before, is you're driving someone out, you're driving someone away. And that's this kind of thing that happens to us, is we see really things that need to be driven out, things that are not good in our culture. Right. But if we're careful, what can happen is that thing that's in our culture like swings around onto our side and is like, get that guy, drive him out. And as soon as you do, you now become the embodiment of the thing you were trying to get away from.
That's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Now, the danger is that we do nothing on the other side and we don't stand up when people are being hurt. Yeah. And we say things like, oh, well, free speech, people can say whatever they want. Right. Well, I'm Canadian, so first of all, I'm not American, so I don't believe in free speech, and we don't have free speech the same way as Americans do. Yeah. But speech can be violent. Speech can be hurtful. Yeah, and we need to protect people against that.
Yeah, hate speech.
Yeah, hate speech is a real thing, and it really is violence, and it really can do damage. So that's not to say, okay, well, then we should let everything go. And it's this really tricky balance. And I think it comes down to constantly sort of trying to evaluate your own heart and say, what am I doing in this moment? Am I trying to protect someone? Or am I trying to drive someone out so that I can feel like I'm the hero in this moment? Right. And I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but isn't that what a lot of the white savior complex is, right? Like we all want to feel like the hero all the time. And sometimes that takes precedence over our desire to actually help someone who's there. So are we protecting people? Are we helping people? Are we serving the least among us? Yeah. If we are, then great. We should be putting all our energy into that. Right. If we're making ourselves feel good, if we're making ourselves feel like the hero, I think, we got to step back a little bit and question ourselves. Right.
I keep kind of thinking about like that we don't like, none of us like arrived fully woke. It takes like learning and messing up and like reaching and developing like a compassionate heart. And if we could be like, oh, you messed up, like, let me help you up.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I messed up. Can you help me up?
Yeah.
And like, we were like
and
moving each
and
other.
we wouldn't feel so shamed when we do mess up.
Yeah.
Like maybe then we'd be able to say, oh,
yeah,
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I've changed my mind.
Right.
Like, you know,
I've
new
changed my
information
mind.
has come into
yeah.
my, like these should be holy sayings.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
to say to somebody,
but we're so
that
afraid of
has-
a misstep
Yeah.
because it means punishment,
Yeah.
and it could mean like ostracization.
Mhm.
Like you might be cast out if you make a misstep. So we end up
yeah.
being so scared to move forward. And
Mhm.
I wonder what it could look like if instead of being like you,
Yeah.
we're like, oh, you, like, oh no, you shouldn't have said it like
Yeah.
that. Come on.
Yeah. And
we're sort of
if you don't want to
struggling
receive
together.
that,
Yeah.
you know, in Jesus'
You get left
words,
behind, I guess.
you dust, you dust the, brush
Right.
the dust off your sandals and
Yeah,
you move on.
we're about some work here.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to catch up or
Exactly.
keep up.
So this is
okay.
not about,
Yeah.
everybody just gets to keep messing up
No,
continually all the
it's
time.
about always moving forward.
Yeah, are we
and
going forward together?
taking
Do you want
as
to come
many,
with us?
yeah, exactly. Taking as many
Yeah.
with us as we can
But yeah,
in our work of justice.
Like Jesus says, if
Yeah.
that person's not ready, if they don't receive that, if they're not ready to listen to that, then
Yeah.
you brush the dust off your sandals and you keep moving forward because there's things to be done and there's people who will listen in the future.
Right.
Okay, we got way off track from
I
now on.
love it. And also, we
some
got
good
all kinds
questions
of
here. Yeah, I know,
chat.
good comments here. So I want to come
Look
back
at
to some
this
of these
group. Okay,
because there's a couple of things in here.
Oh gosh, it's going to take me a
And he
while
says,
to
I think the Bible and the historical narrative point to real meaning. Encyclopedic nonfiction is a modern conception based on myth of objective facts without culture and observations. And then Ashley comes up and says, I always talk about the
These
truth
guys.
of poetry. And she's got this good example. Use the example in my brain when my husband says I'm the most beautiful woman. I'm not. He hasn't even met all the other women in the world. So he can't objectively say that.
Yeah.
But there is truth in that, right? That comes
Yeah.
across. And this is going back to
Oh,
Ashley's
that's
comments
lovely.
from the start.
Right.
What about people who say, hey, you can't use myth about the Bible? You can't. Well, first of all, if somebody is afraid of that word, then don't use that word.
That's it exactly. I
if
think
somebody
that's really
was freaked
true.
out by that, I would just say, fine, like let's call it stories.
Yeah.
Let's call it whatever. Let's call it truth, but let's understand what that means. And the one example that is helpful for people sometimes, not always. This is not like I was gonna say a trump card, but now
Ooh,
then
I know
every time
the
you can't even use that word anymore. But
Try
I don't
another
mean it that way.
one.
But it's not a trump card. But I think sometimes this can be helpful when you say to people, listen, are Jesus' parables true? And everybody says yes. And I would say Jesus' parables are, I would argue, the most true statements we have in the Bible.
Okay.
Right? First of all, because they're coming from Jesus, and that's the lens through which we read everything else.
Point of the
Part one.
series.
Yeah.
Point of the series.
But also, because I would argue that Jesus teaches that way specifically because stories have a way of transcending their particular moment, right? Jesus can teach to issues of his day, but then we have to do so much work of parsing out, okay, well, what's going on in that context and how we do it. When we get a story, we can say, well, what does that story mean for us? And we can do that. So they're more true, but they didn't really happen. They're made up stories. That's what parables are.
Right.
So why can we not say that the creation narratives are made up stories that are some of the
so
most true
true.
things you will ever read?
Right.
Jonah, we just did that one this fall. I mean, we spent a lot of time unpacking an incredibly powerful story. Is it true? Yes. Did it happen? No. These are the wrong types of questions.
Right.
And that's what the line I used on Sunday was, if you come to ancient texts with questions about cosmology, you need to expect to get ancient cosmological answers.
Right. What was your language around why and how
Yeah.
as well? That was really helpful.
Yeah, that I forgot about that. But yeah, so it's a little bit of an anachronism, right?
Yes.
But the way that I like to think about it is these ancient stories are not asking questions of how the way that we do.
Right.
Because of our scientific framework.
Yeah.
We're like, well, how did that happen? How could that happen? How did we get here?
Yeah.
How did the universe form?
Yeah.
Super important questions.
Yeah, it's fun.
None of us get Teslas if we don't ask those questions, right? That's what gives us science. But that's not what the ancient world was asking about. They were asking about, what does this mean? Or why does this happen?
Right.
Why do floods happen?
Yeah.
Why do humans exist?
Right.
How did we come to be?
Right. And sort of making sense of transcendence to these, like,
Exactly.
whoa.
These are human
mortality.
beings trying to make sense of their experience in the world. And I think the other thing that I said that is sort of important is they're not less smart than us. They have, ancient
They're
cultures.
not?
Yeah. So I don't know if there's a real word, but I use it sometimes. It's Chrono Centrism, where we have this idea that our present moment is the culmination of everything.
Interesting.
Meaning we're smarter, we're more advanced, we're more this. We're not. Yeah. We have certain things that have built over time to give us certain ways of engaging the world around us right now, right? The ancient world was asking a different set of questions. They were no less observant about the world around them. Like you look at ancient ideas about constellations and the stars. And I mean, there's people, like, I don't know, sometimes I get on this thread where I start watching flat earth videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I've never
Not actually people, somehow on my YouTube account, YouTube has decided I love these because I watched a few and you watch the same thing and it keeps saying.
Yeah,
so they're not videos of people explaining flat earth. It's people debunking flat earth people. But I've watched enough of them that YouTube's like, this is the thing that Jeremy wants to watch is people debunking flat earth videos. And, you know, whatever. They're the same thing all the time.
We need to really listen to your sermons, though. If you start sort of shifting towards it, and we'll be like, somebody turn off his YouTube.
It's so funny how YouTube like feeds you the thing that you've already watched.
There's a whole podcast about this right now.
Yeah, it's exactly.
The Rabbit Hole.
I've listened to them actually. Very good actually. On the Daily from the New York Times. You should listen to it if you haven't yet. But you know, this resurgence of people like thinking flat Earth, and thinking that the globe is a new thing. It's not. Like thousands of years ago, people were looking at the stars and going, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And how can this be? And making observations about around Earth. You know. So yeah, I mean, and there was points in history where flat Earth came back and globe Earth came back. But my point is, thousands of years ago, people were very observant about the world around them. They just had different presuppositions about what questions were important to ask. Was it important to ask exactly how grain of wheat goes in the ground and sprouts and comes to life? No. Is it important to understand the why of cycles and how you gather those things and what that means and how you live in concert with nature? Yes, because that's how they live.
I mean, some of the conversation around myth is that they weren't asking such different questions, like that there are these sort of central human questions. And maybe we get a bit fixated on some of the ones over here, and we sort of forget like some of these more central, I don't know if that's the word I want really, but these like larger life meaning making, like that, like why, what happens after death, you know, what does any of it mean? Like those are still really
we distract ourselves from
those questions. That's it, I think, being with our house instead of really paying attention to the whys.
And that's where you have these ancient myths that are profoundly beautiful and profoundly important
and still
will
important.
Teach us a lot. Like
I think that's what I wanted to draw us to is that we still have the same questions, and the myths still or the stories still offer us a way into our humanity in relationship with the divine and with one another. Benediction. See ya.
Yeah, there you go. Mic drop. Mic toss.
That's your benediction.
No, I mean, I love that. And it's just about what do we see in Jesus, and then how do we come back, and how do we read these myths, and how do we reinterpret them? Like you know, like with Noah. If I have certain assumptions about God from what I see in Jesus, there's certain things that are going to be off the table in terms of my interpretation of Noah.
I wanted to, as we close, bring Karen Armstrong back into the conversation. And I really loved this bit for our moment right now. So she wrote in her book, A Short History of Myth, as our circumstances change, and I was thinking about how we're in such an interesting moment of change. She said, we need to tell our stories differently in order to bring out their timeless truth. We shall see that every time men and women took a major step forward, they reviewed their mythology and made it speak to the new condition. And I just I loved that. We sort of feel like we're in this real moment of change. And she's saying, you know, get those myths and bring your changing world back into relationship with these stories.
So can we come back around to the start? We've had certain myths around Canada. We've had certain myths around America. And I think what's happening right now is some of those myths are being challenged. In the States, you know, this idea that the United States is a shining beacon on a hill. It has been for many different types of conversations in the world. Democracy, constitution, those types of things. was the myth that we created about that actually historically accurate? No.
Right.
Because there was
it's
this
like it was shining this light, but it had this all this shadow.
This deep underbelly.
Yeah.
And the wealth and the prosperity of the United States built on on slave labor. Yeah. Right. So yes, there is good there, but if we allow that myth to go unchallenged, we're going to propagate a lot of things. Yeah. Now, Canada, we have the same stuff. I mean, part of our modern myth is that we're not America. Yes. And we're not. Our issues with racism are different. Right. But we have them just as badly.
Absolutely, yeah.
In some ways, I don't think better or worse is the question. I think sometimes it's more insidious in Canada because we're so polite about things, though. Right. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I'm not sure that's the right spectrum to even talk about it, but I think it can be more insidious because, we're less aware of things. Yeah. And our history, I mean, my goodness, you hear Americans like, slavery ended 200 years ago. Right. Yes. And lots of problems since then. Canada, residential schools ended in the 80s.
Yes. In our lifetime.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is this moment right now. It's like, okay, so is there good in our myth? Yes. Should that myth go unchallenged? Should that myth be allowed to continue the same way? No, we have to make new myths now. Yeah. And maybe that's
especially
a little
in a
bit
with change,
of what's happening right now.
Right.
Is it, fully yet? No, I mean, that's what we're going to find out in the next 10 years. But
and we can feel threatened, or we can be like, okay, there are things I don't know and I want to learn and move forward in this moment, which I think is a good invitation.
Okay. That's an hour.
That's it.
You want to talk about what we're grateful for?
Yeah. What are we grateful for?
Yeah. You want to start? You want me to start?
You go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. So here's what I'm grateful for. Okay. Our small group got together on Friday, so that was stage 2. So those who are in small groups in the community, we're allowing small groups to meet again in person as long as they stay socially distanced. Some groups may want to consider themselves a cohort because the province is allowing that, but that's a little more intense because they want you to that's the only people that you're seeing within that cohort. Yeah. But our group got together on Friday night and did the socially distance thing, but it was the first time we had anyone in our house, I think, since January, because we were kind of pretty shut down with M coming home. Yeah. So it had been a long time. Yeah. And you know what I was really grateful for? First of all, I had fun, and it's good people and good friends, but I was thankful for families brought their kids over and my son played and wasn't weird. You never know. He hasn't seen another kid.
We've been wondering about this for kids. Yeah. What is this moment doing?
So we haven't had people in our house for 5 months. He hasn't seen kids since school shut down 3 months ago. Yeah. Any kid. Yeah. We can't even go to the playground. And so, but it was great. They all picked up they just left off and they had a great time and so I was really grateful for that. I was like, okay, we're going to be okay. It's going to be good. We're going to come through this. Yeah. My son is still going to have social skills on the other side of this. Yeah. I might not, but I didn't have many social skills to begin with, so that's fine.
Bless you.
Yeah. I just want to continue doing. I'm going to do so bye. The camera. Anyone who's in our small group right now, this is what we're going to do from now on. You can come over to our house, talk with Rachel. I'll stay in the bedroom with a camera and talk to you. No, I'm just kidding. What are you grateful for?
Again, I'm grateful for my partner. And, we're just over a month away from a really big change for us. And it's been fun to process that together, as we prepare to move into a house that has a little more space. And it's just been fun. I think we're already sort of experiencing different emotions. And I love that I have this person in my life to talk about those things with. It's really nice.
It's cool.
So I'm glad I'm going to talk about this new house forever and ever. Amen.
For at least 6 more weeks anyway.
Yeah. But then I'm going to move there and I'm going to keep talking about this is what we did this week. I painted this wall.
Yeah, that should be a segment on the after party.
Bobby's house.
It's what'd you do this week?
Yeah.
Sermon, grateful, and Bobby's house update.
Well, I don't have kids, so I'll talk about my house like it's a child.
Yeah, all right, cool. I like it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time tonight. Have a great week.
So
we will be on Instagram for Living Room Worship tomorrow.
Right.
We'll be on the common area, all the normal stuff this week. But we're a couple weeks away now from opening, and we're working really hard. We're open to feedback. So if you've got concerns, if you've got questions, let us know.
Yeah.
The plan. We've done a lot of work. We've got quite comprehensive plans. But as we listen, as we learn, as we try different things, we're going to be adjusting those plans. So stay up to date on commons.church/reopen, and Sunday during the live stream, registration will be ready to go.
Yeah. Thanks for trusting us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.